The Willow Creek Schoolhouse has been closed for a century, but every night, precisely at 9:01 p.m., a single bell tolls from its shattered clock tower. It's a low, resonant gong that seems to shake the silence more than the air, followed by the faint, muffled sound of children's laughter. The locals say the schoolhouse never stopped its curriculum, it just changed its students. Ethan, a demolition expert assessing the building for removal, scoffed at the legends, but the moment he cut the padlock on the front gate, the air around him dropped 20 degrees, and the sweet, cloying smell of chalk dust and old varnish became overwhelming. The interior was a frozen tableau. Desks lined up, books open to the same page, a half-erased problem on the blackboard. Everything was covered in a deep, undisturbed layer of gray dust. As Ethan stepped onto the warped hardwood floor of the main hallway, a low, collective whisper echoed from the empty classrooms, a sound like 100 tiny voices repeating a single, monotonous phrase in unison. "Recess is canceled. Recess is canceled." Ethan ignored the whispering, aiming his flashlight at the principal's office. The door was a heavy, dark oak, split down the middle by a crude, vertical break that looked less like decay and more like a massive, deliberate blow. He pushed the door open. Inside, the room was strangely pristine, the dust layer much thinner. A single object sat on the antique mahogany desk, a composition notebook, bound in black leather, its pages filled with perfect, uniform, cursive writing. It wasn't a student's work, it was the principal's log. Ethan flipped to the final entry, dated precisely 100 years ago. The script was immaculate, detailing the final assembly before the mysterious closure, concluding with a terrifying scrawled addendum at the bottom. "The curriculum has shifted. The children require silence. The floor is hungry." As Ethan read the last sentence, a low, rhythmic thump, thump, thump began directly beneath his feet, the sound of a large, heavy object being struck against wood deep within the floorboards. The whispering in the hall intensified, now sounding frantic, laced with terror. "Don't make a sound! Don't! Make a sound!" The rhythmic pounding from beneath the principal's office grew louder, more insistent, interspersed with the distinct squeaking sound of tiny wheels turning, like an old iron cart being dragged along stone. Ethan abandoned the notebook and raced back into the main hallway, his flashlight beam slicing through the dust-filled air. The pounding had left a clear trace. On the old hardwood floor, directly in front of the principal's door, was a wide, fresh smear of a dark, viscous substance that smelled strongly of iron and old rust. The whispering had stopped entirely, replaced by a profound, deathly silence that felt heavier and more malevolent than the sound. Ethan understood. The children's ghosts, the source of the whispers, were not the danger. They were the victims, trapped in a perpetual silent lesson by something far older and more sinister, a punishing entity that enforced silence with violence. The pounding and the squeaking wheels were coming closer, and the dark stain on the floor was spreading, soaking into the dry wood. Ethan scrambled for the nearest classroom, throwing himself through the doorway and slamming the brittle door shut behind him. He looked out through the dusty, cracked window that faced the inner courtyard. The rhythmic pounding had stopped, but the squeaking of the wheels was now directly in the hallway, followed by a heavy, deliberate clunk outside his door. The doorknob began to turn slowly, inexorably. Ethan pressed his back against the wall, realizing the entity was not a ghost. It was a mechanism, a cruel, enduring engine of punishment. He focused on the window, his only way out. He smashed the glass with the butt of his flashlight, the sound a deafening explosion in the pervasive silence. The instant the glass shattered, the doorknob stopped turning. The squeaking wheels retreated, and the children's voices flooded the room again. Not a whisper, but a chorus of delighted, manic laughter, seeming to thank him for breaking the enforced silence. He climbed out the window, dropping 10 feet into the overgrown courtyard. The laughter followed him, not malicious, but terrifying in its unbridled, unnatural joy. As he scrambled over the final stretch of wrought iron fence, he looked back at the schoolhouse. The hallway windows were dark, but the principal's office was now illuminated by a single, sickly yellow light. Through the massive, broken oak door, he saw a final chilling tableau. A tall, skeletal figure in a long, dark coat, bent over a table. The figure was meticulously wiping the hardwood floor clean with a thick iron rag, the sound of the scraping metal barely audible, preparing the space for the next round of silent lessons. The figure paused, and its head slowly turned to face the fence. It had no face, only a smooth, pale surface, and embedded in the center, a single, perfect piece of white chalk, its tip stained crimson. It was the janitor, the keeper of the silence, and he had noticed the new mess. Ethan ran, the faint sound of a single, slow, rhythmic thump-thump echoing from the schoolhouse floorboards, signaling that the curriculum was about to continue. Subscribe to Whisper Dark for more.